Welcome to Data Science Perspectives. This series focuses on analytics and data science professionals from across industry to learn about how their career unfolded, what skills they look for when hiring, and what trends they think are coming next. I'm your host, Bill Franks. Let's get to it. Welcome to this episode of Data Science Perspectives. I'm your host, Bill Franks. Today's guest is Hatem Sellami. Hatem and I first met about 15 years ago when we were both in roles we've long since moved on from. Like me, he's always had a love of retail analytics, and he's started several companies focused in that space. Being a local Atlantan, it's been easy for us to stay in touch over the years, and in fact, he even sponsored some research at KSU just a few years ago. Hatem's currently the founder and CEO of both Cognira and RetSci. Cognira helps retailers, wholesalers, and brands with complex forecasting and promotional challenges. RetSci is focused on consulting around that same space. Prior to his current startups, he was founder and president of Predictix, which was sold to multi-billion-dollar conglomerate Infor. He began his career with software firm Retek, which was purchased in 2005 by Oracle to form Oracle's retail business unit. He has a range of degrees from Georgia Tech, including a BS and MS in electrical and computer engineering, a PhD in computer engineering, and an MBA as well. And with that, let's welcome Hatem to the show. Thanks for joining me on the show today, Hatem.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I always like to start out with the questions and ask, what is it that originally pulled you into the world of data science and analytics?
Well, when I went to college, I found, and even from high school and before, I always had a tendency to like math and statistics and all of that. And when I went to college here at Georgia Tech, actually my first quarter, I took a senior class in statistics, and I really loved it. And I continued to be always interested in mathematical topics, etc. And then when I graduated, one of my former classmates told me, if you're interested in joining this company, and the role was a data scientist, and I said, yeah, why not? So I'll start into it and see what it's like. And since then, I like it. I continue to like it. Obviously, it's even more important and more common now, the topic of data science or the role of data science. But I've been doing it for more than 20 years now.
Story's similar to so many, because back people in our general age range, since it wasn't really a career, so many people kind of stumbled into it. Hey, I got offered this job, and then we started doing some analytics, or a friend of mine said I should come and do this thing. It wasn't like hardly anyone was planning to go into this field back 25 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. I was not planning to become a data scientist, but when the opportunity came up, I thought, yeah, that's really interesting, because it's my background is suitable. I have an interest in this topic, and then there is an opportunity, so why not take advantage of it? Yeah.
Well, when you started, you were with a firm that at the time was very well known, Retek, software company, and one of their major focuses was some retail-oriented software. I know they've since had been acquired many years back by Oracle and became a part of the core Oracle system. But what drew you initially then even within Retek to some of those retail applications, and then stuck in your mind that you decided to really focus on a lot of retail things for the years that followed?
Yeah, like I said, it was a pure coincidence that one of my former classmates was working for Retek. He graduated before me, and he was working at Retek, and Retek at the time was growing, was having a lot of success, and he asked me to join the company, and I joined that company. Really, I did not have a specific desire to go into retail specifically. It just happened that there was an opportunity, there was a role, and I said, I'll try it out. Why not? My family, my father was a retailer himself, so I kind of grew up in an environment where we talk retail, and we have retail stores back home, and it was not like a foreign industry to me. But I never planned to be working in the retail industry or working in data science. Like I said, it all happened as a coincidence. It's a good opportunity. I jumped on it. And then when I started working on it, very quickly I developed that specialty, if you like. And very quickly I realized that actually my customers like what I have to offer them. And that became very rewarding for me personally. And I continued to be working in that space. And the more I work in it, the more I develop skills and experience and expertise. And if I can continue to help people in this industry, I'll continue to stick with it.
So out of all the people that I know, I think you are by far the most knowledgeable when it comes to the areas of retail forecasting and promotional analysis and such. In fact, you were generous enough a few years ago to sponsor some work with some of our students addressing that area. Knowing what you know from the inside, what are some of the nuances of either the data or the analytics themselves when it comes to retail forecasting and promotion that people would not realize?
Yeah, it's actually a very, very difficult place to be in from a data scientist perspective. Um, in general, retailers don't have good quality data compared to other industries. So they have lots of data, but it's not always organized or clean or ready to be processed as we wish as data scientists. So that's one common thread across all of our projects, all our customers. But the other thing is forecasting in general, which is the main thing that we do most of the time. Anything we do in data science and analytics and retail involves a forecasting of some sort. So forecasting in general, whenever you're predicting something, it's always difficult. Okay, when you are trying to predict sales or demand of products at a retail store, it's even harder because sometimes you have items that you sell once a month in a particular store, and we're trying to predict and forecast at the week level. It's very hard to try to determine when that sale is gonna happen. And most of the times we don't even try. We just say, okay, probably it's gonna sell on average about once a month or twice a month or something like that. So the sparsity of data in general and retail makes it really hard. When we go to promotions specifically, then the hardest thing that we face with promotions is there is not a lot of historical data of the promotions themselves. A lot of retailers do promotions in so many different ways, and they don't necessarily have systems that track those promotions historically. And when we are trying to learn from the performance of certain promotions in the past, if we don't have the data, it makes it significantly hard to try to predict the effect of that. So the lack of specific data related to promotions makes it even hard. The other thing that is hard is in promotions also specifically, retailers typically have what we call overlapping promotions. You can have an item that is in an ad, and also that item is 20% off, and that item is probably in another promotion that if you buy this, you can get something else half price or 20% off or something. So there are potential of a lot of overlapping promotions. And when you look at the sales of that particular item that was involved in the same week in different promotions, you can't distinguish what's the impact of one promotion versus the others that were happening at the same time. So you don't know whether you had an uplift because the item was on the ad, or you had an uplift because the item was on 20% off. Or likely you have an uplift for both of those, but we don't know which bigger uplift is coming from which type of promotion. So that makes it hard. Another one that makes it very hard is the promotions when it's happening at the same time as a seasonal effect. So let's say you're trying to promote an item. On top of that, it's Christmas, so people are buying more of that item. Again, trying to separate the impact of the promotion from the impact of the seasonality makes it really hard. So these are things that really makes this problem of trying to forecast the impact of promotions on retail items really, really hard, that require a lot of effort, a lot of techniques, and a lot of computing power to try to get to the bottom of it.
So if you recall, early in my career, I actually did a lot of pricing and promotion analysis for retailers as well. And I mean, a couple of those things you mentioned, I recall also just the fact of all the overlapping events that were occurring, which made it so difficult mathematically to separate them. And a lot of times, we were having to make some assumptions. I also recall one thing that I was always fascinated by was those slow moving items that you talk about, with sparse sales. When you're trying to decide when should a retailer buy more, sometimes let's say you're talking about a granola bar, it comes in a 6-pack or an 8-pack, and if you're going to sell one, at some point you're going to have to just buy a bunch of extra inventory or risk being out of inventory, but there's no way to actually make it a nice smooth, it comes in as you need it,
Yeah.
and use it up. So I suppose over the years you've probably come up with all sorts of ways to help handle those scenarios better.
Yeah, and actually, for slow moving items in particular, uh, people who are experienced forecasters like us or data scientists, they do realize that you don't really need to forecast those items, because typically the presentation stock, which is the minimum inventory you have on the shelf, so for that item to look good on the shelf, it's usually more than what you will sell in that week. So as long as you meet the minimum for the presentation stock, you don't have to worry about knowing when you're going to sell that one item or two items in a month. Your presentation stock is probably 10 items, so you're always going to have 10 in the store anyway. It doesn't really matter whether the forecast is accurate or not. So we kind of skip those forecasts. We don't need to waste our time trying to predict that, but we focus on the more higher, faster moving items, which typically will have bigger impact on margin, bigger impact on the overall performance of the retailer. And it's those where we spend a lot of the effort to get them as accurate as possible.
So you already mentioned about, it's a lot of data, it takes a lot of processing power. Over the years, have you seen an evolution in the data that's available and or the techniques that are being utilized based on being able to store more data and have more processing power? Or is it largely a lot of the same techniques that just are able to run a lot faster?
No, there is definitely a huge improvement in the techniques and data availability and computing power. Obviously, when I first started my career, we were limiting ourselves to only models and techniques that we can fit within a 16 gig memory computer. We were sometimes, waiting for somebody to finish their run before we can run our run, etc. Now, thankfully, with the abundance of computing power through the cloud, that's not a problem we worry about at all. So we have the most sophisticated models, the most sophisticated algorithms. We just run them as much as we want. Of course, it costs money, but it's still the benefits, it outweighs the cost. And quite honestly, retailers over the last, I would say, 2 decades, they've been accumulating a lot of good data, a lot of, again, because storage costs a lot less today. So they've been accumulating all sorts of data online, offline, in the store, everywhere. And that data is very useful for us. And when we talk to our customers, they ask us, how much data do you want? And we say, the more the merrier. All the data you can give us. Of course, data that is older than 2 or 3 years may not be as relevant, but still we would like to have as much as possible. And then we let our system train itself on that history and determine what's the best forecast they can produce. So I would say, from the perspective of data and computing power and availability of techniques and algorithms, life is significantly better for a data scientist today than it was a couple of decades ago when I first started my career.
So one thing that's unique about you is that you took a leap and you founded a company, then you sold that company, and then you've actually founded 2 more since then. So what led you to take that initial leap to start a company and then actually repeat that entire painful process?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me this question. I always say I agree. It's a big leap that I took, but similar to my experience with retail, I actually my family, my close family as well as my extended family, they're all entrepreneurs, And so I grew up in that environment, and a measure of success for us in my culture and my family is you have to be an entrepreneur. So I always had that in my mind. I was always looking for the opportunity to become an entrepreneur. So when I worked at Retek and developed this experience in forecasting and retail science in general, I saw the opportunity when we were acquired by Oracle. I lived the experience of Retek from a startup until a mature company, and we got acquired by Oracle. I thought this is probably the opportunity for me to leave that company and start a new startup. I actually was lucky because at the time of the acquisition by Oracle, my stock options had value, and that gave me the financial cushion that I needed. So it's less risky because I made enough money through that transaction to allow me to take a bigger risk. And I didn't have kids at the time. It was easier to take a risk, and it was a risk, even though I was confident in what I would be able to do. But it was really a risk. So and it's not for the faint of hearts. It's really you have ups and downs every day, and sometimes on a good day you'll be very happy. On a bad day you would question, why did I make that decision? And after I did it the first time, and I had the co-founder with me, so that meant I shared the risk with somebody else. That also helped a little bit. But then after going through it with the second company, it became relatively easy to do the third and the fourth, and it's just repeating the same process. And you develop a thick skin. You know that you're not going to be it's not going to be as risky as it may appear, especially if you had the experience of doing it. So it's just you just jump into it and do it.
I don't know if I've ever actually told you this, but I still recall when we met, I think it was in the early teens when the cloud was relatively new. And I remember coming to your office when you were still a pretty young company and you were describing kind of your cloud first strategy. And at the time, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that seems crazy, because that was when people were still very hesitant to go to the cloud. I remember thinking, well, he could be right, but this has potential to just be an utter disaster because no one's going to want to send their data to the cloud. And of course, you ended up being 100% right, and I was totally wrong. So kudos to you on that. I still remember leaving your office that day and just thinking, man, I hope he knows what he's getting into.
Actually, I can't take full credit for that. Uh, we were, as a young startup, we were looking to be different, and we didn't have a lot of money to buy all the computers and not mainframes, but they were big large servers that we needed to buy. So we didn't kind of have a choice. To be different, we had to pursue the cloud. We had to pursue the SaaS business model because they were new and nobody was doing them at the time. And also we didn't even have money to invest in servers and buying them, so we had to rely on the cloud. And you are right, our early customers, we actually had to convince them to put their data on a cloud that is owned by Amazon at the time, which everybody was worried about Amazon. We had to convince them, and I think the benefits outweigh the risk and the costs, and that's why people very quickly, actually, I was amazed at how quickly the transition happened from on-prem to on the cloud. Very quickly, we went from no way I'm going to give you my data to put somewhere else to I would only consider software that is cloud-based. That transition happened very quickly, and that worked to our advantage.
Each of the companies you founded, you've remained here in the Atlanta area. Even given that obviously there's plenty of options and people in your line of work in the cloud in the early days would have gravitated more towards California back then. What is it that kept you here in Atlanta in terms of the business environment and the talent pool?
Yeah, well, I went to school here. I went to Georgia Tech. I'm actually a few hundred yards away from Georgia Tech, where I am now. When I graduated, my first job was in Atlanta. Wherever you take your first job, I think that's where typically people stay, especially when we started the first company. we hired a lot of our former colleagues who were already in Atlanta, so it made sense to be in Atlanta, quite honestly. And there is Georgia Tech, I think, played an important role for us to be this close to campus, because we hired a lot of people from Georgia Tech. It's an excellent school, lots of great engineers, lots of great data scientists. So uh, nice weather, new city, relatively new, excellent airport. You can fly to wherever you want to go, domestically and internationally, almost nonstop everywhere. So there are a lot of benefits to the city of Atlanta. And since my college years were here, started working here, so I didn't have any reason why to relocate to another city or another state.
If you look back over the years, what's one or two traits you have that you think have really been core to the success that you've been able to achieve?
That's a tough question to answer, but yeah, it's primarily, I would say, um, work hard at it, and whatever you're doing, try to do your best, and try to um, under promise and over deliver in everything that you do, and develop good relationships with people, everybody that you work with, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's customers, whether it's partners. I think those are the most important things. I happen to be very passionate about what I'm doing. I think that also helped a lot in my career. I'm really, really passionate about the space. I'm really passionate about helping our customers uh, apply science to help them make better decisions. So those are really, really the trait. I'm not afraid of taking risks, which also makes it helpful, especially as an entrepreneur and as building startups. I think that's important. I don't think I could have done the three companies that I built if I was not able to take the risk. It's really you have to have the ability to take risks in life. Most of them were calculated risks, but nonetheless they are risks. So I think those are, in general, there is not one or two traits. I think it's a lot of things that come together. Yeah, and I'm sure everybody has a different perception on what actually helped them in their career. These are happen to be the things that I think about.
Well, I've taken a good chunk of your time. Why don't we finish with one last thought? You talked about what you think made you successful, and I loved your point about the willingness to take risk, because obviously, not everyone has that appetite as you did. What would be your advice to wrap things up for students who are thinking of getting into the field of data science and analytics, and if they're going to come, whether they're going to come work for your company or want to start their own? What do you encourage them to do?
Yeah, I think my advice to graduating students is not specific to data science, but in general to the going into the work life. My advice is just give it everything that you have. Um, don't shy away from volunteering to do additional work. Um, Always build a strong network. I think building a network with your colleagues and your partners and customers is really, really important. I am certain that I wouldn't be in this position here with the companies that I have if I didn't have a strong network of people that I can rely on, and people I can rely on for introductions. I can rely on for hiring and recruiting. I can rely on for many other things. And um, I know that a lot of people now work remotely or prefer to work remotely. As somebody early in his career, I would recommend to make an effort to meet people in person, make an effort, even if your company does not have an office where you are, go and meet people in meetups, people, like-minded people to you in your industry or in your area of specialty. Meet people. I think it's important to meet people. You learn a lot from other people who have done what you have done before you, or have done more of it than you. um, Help people. Don't be um, uh, help people in their careers as you start. I'm sure even if you start in month 1, by month 6 or month 12, there are people who just started. So try to help those people, share the knowledge. I think those are my recommendations, and especially being around people is extremely important.
Well, I think you gave us some great insights today. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you coming and joining the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a pleasure.